What's going on, guys? We got to talk about Bitcoin today. We have to talk about a couple of Bitcoin miners. Bitcoin is creating new 52-week highs, while a lot of miners, in 3 examples I'll show you, are down roughly 8% or more. To me, times like these are great buying opportunities. You're seeing Bitcoin increase in price, see 52-week highs again. And these miners are pulling back. Is this the market pricing in rewards being cut? I do think so. But times like these are great opportunities to add, because the reality is, as Bitcoin goes up in price, if these miners are going down, well, that just makes them even more attractive. The underlying asset that all of these companies are connected to in one way or another, whether it's Bitcoin held, whether it's Bitcoin mined, as that price of Bitcoin goes up and these miners show weakness, that makes these stocks an even better value. And as we're approaching the halving, I do think this is the market pricing in rewards getting cut. And the reality is, while rewards getting cut is obviously negative for the miners, what comes with it? Well, what usually comes with it is Bitcoin seeing all-time highs after the halving. Maybe this cycle around we see all-time highs before the halving, but that's a subject for another video. In the end, the halving is a huge positive for these Bitcoin miners. And while looking at it like this and seeing that the day before the halving versus the day after the halving, these miners are going to be basically taking in half as much Bitcoin, the reality is throughout the rest of 2024 into 2025, the price of Bitcoin will more than make up for these rewards getting cut for the miners. But let's get started on this video. I'm going to talk about what Bitcoin's doing. We're going to talk about a couple of miners and my thoughts on them. And we're going to go over a few other things as well. If you guys like these videos, consider hitting the like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. It definitely helps me out. Check out the links down below for some free stocks and cryptos. And consider joining my YouTube membership for $2 a month to show your support. And Bitcoin continues to push higher, despite people saying that we're overbought, we're due to cool down. And while yes, from a technical standpoint, we are technically due to cool down a bit, but in every cycle we have seen a much more overbought Bitcoin on the weekly, on the monthly, on the daily. And I do think what's more important than looking at the RSI at a time like this, what's really important is the fact that we're so close to the halving. We can see Bitcoin become much more overbought before seeing a sizable pullback. And honestly, where we're at so far in this cycle, I think I might have to raise my price target for Bitcoin. I was expecting 80,000 by August. It seems like that's well within reach. And we honestly might even be testing 90, 100K by August, if not by the end of this year. And it'll be awesome to see what the effect of these spot Bitcoin ETFs have once Bitcoin goes through the halving, once half as much Bitcoin per day is introduced into the market. This ETF buying pressure will cause Bitcoin to rise up in price even more so than it has so far, considering that incoming Bitcoin is going to be cut in half. And this is why Bitcoin is so amazing. It's hard capped at a certain amount of coins, 21 million will ever be produced. And the Bitcoin halving creates an amazing supply and demand dynamic, where we see demand skyrocket knowing that the supply is going to be diminished. And Bitcoin has always trended around this 4-year cycle, where around the halving, where we are right now, we see a huge rally year and the year that follows it, which would be 2025. And then once we see Bitcoin get to these crazy prices, show signs of topping off, then we get to crypto winter, which looking back every time has been a great opportunity to add. But let's take a look at the Bitcoin miners. You'd think that as Bitcoin creates new 52-week highs, gets so close to those all-time highs, so close towards breaking 69, getting to 70,000, seeing prices we haven't seen yet. And what are the Bitcoin miners doing? Well, they're down nearly 10%. And CleanSpark is now down to $16 roughly. I do think if we fail this zone, we are heading to $15, and this will be a very important level to watch as well. If we break 15, there really isn't much keeping us from going down to 14, potentially lower, possibly even filling this gap, although I find that somewhat unlikely based on where we're at here. One area that I think the market's really going to try to hold up for CleanSpark, if we do head down to it, will be roughly this 1370 area. This was a previous peak, turned out to be a resistance. Once we broke up to that level, we did bounce off it as a support. It's possibly that we test it as a support. And I think this would be a fantastic price point to buy some CleanSpark if we do get down there. But many of these miners are 30% and more down from their recent highs. And I personally gotta say, I think this is the market pricing in the halving rewards getting cut. Does that mean we won't see more pain in the future? Of course not. Maybe this isn't the market pricing in rewards getting cut. Maybe we do sell off even more than potentially 50% from our peak. But I personally believe, looking back 6 months from now, buying CleanSpark at 16, buying CleanSpark at 18, buying CleanSpark at 14 potentially. Looking back, these will all be fantastic buy points, and I believe will be much higher in price. And I want to show you something really interesting for CleanSpark, and I'll preface this by saying I don't expect this to happen. CleanSpark was a much smaller market cap at the time, but let me show you the kind of performance we saw with CleanSpark from here till the peak. Looking back at the previous cycle, now I'm not at the very bottom here on CleanSpark, we did have that flash crash, so think about that. In reality, from its bottom, it's more like a 3,000% gain during that cycle, but putting it a little higher in price from that flash crash, because I don't expect us to see that. That was a black swan event and I don't expect it, but CleanSpark during that cycle nearly gained 2,500%. And like I said, while I don't expect that kind of performance, we're dealing with a different market cap size. Just for shits and giggles, imagine where we could be if we see the same kind of gain. This would bring CleanSpark to about $400 per share. And while I don't expect us to do a 3,000%, can we do a 1,000%? Can we roughly 10x from here? I do think that's very possible. That would put us right around a $30 billion market cap. If we could see consistent profitability from CleanSpark, and if it's among the only Bitcoin miners that are posting a profit, I could definitely see CleanSpark by the peak of the bull run at a $30 billion market cap. If they're making income and not losing money from their balance sheet, if they're adding to their balance sheet, if they're adding to their Bitcoin balance, if they're pulling in consistent profitability, I could definitely see this company being $150, $160 a share at the peak of the bull run. And maybe it sounds a little far-fetched now, but imagine, say, 6-7 months from now, what if CleanSpark's 50 bucks or so? I think it seems a lot more likely. And if it's at that price 6 months from now, well, we still have a lot of the cycle left to go. But I'm curious, where do you guys think CleanSpark is going? What's the peak price for CleanSpark for you guys? Now, before I show you the other Bitcoin miners I want to show you on the chart, I want to mention that Bitcoin is now at an all-time high denominated in euros, and next up is the US dollar. But it's very interesting to see that in other parts of the world, Bitcoin is at all-time highs in those countries' currencies. I think that's extremely interesting, and it's something we really don't think about being here and worrying about the USD price of Bitcoin. Other countries have seen considerably more inflation, and people in other countries seeing Bitcoin break all-time highs in their currency. You know, it's a lot like when we see all-time highs for Bitcoin and you start hearing random people talk about Bitcoin that otherwise would never have Bitcoin in their mouth. That's just how things are. Seems like the general public doesn't care about Bitcoin unless it's at all-time highs, and then it gets the attention. But Bitcoin is so close to all-time highs. Soon Bitcoin is going to get the attention it deserves from everyday people, just like it did last cycle. And it is a bit bittersweet when you hear everybody and their mama talking about Bitcoin. It makes you a little cautious at that point. Now I want to show you btbt. It's over 50% from its peak back in the end of last year. And I'm keeping an eye on BitDigital. They should be releasing their mining update, so stay tuned for that. It'll likely be in a following video. But btbt stakes Ethereum. As Ethereum goes up, I do expect btbt to run with Ethereum, although it hasn't yet. I think something is overshadowing it. I think that's the fear of mining rewards getting cut. And we are definitely seeing some weakness across the miners. In my opinion, this is the time to be loading up on them. They're getting even more attractive as their underlying asset, Bitcoin, goes up in price. But btbt is approaching a pretty strong support level. Maybe it breaks it, but I see it as a great buy point. I do expect this to run with ETH spot ETF euphoria. The market will eventually see this for what it is. It's also a Bitcoin miner. It's also getting into AI, but it's also tied to Ethereum. And once the market realizes this, I do believe it'll pop with Ethereum, but it really hasn't yet. So far, I'm wrong. I also want to talk about Sphere 3D, very similar to btbt. We're down 50-something% from our top established back at the end of last year. And this is an extremely small market cap. Last I looked, they were like a $25 million market cap. And I really think the market is discounting the fact that they're getting $10 million in equity from Core. I think the market really isn't paying attention to that, or they just simply don't care. The market has definitely been treating these higher risk Bitcoin miners pretty badly lately, but I believe the hype will drop back in and we will see these miners pop again. And while I showed you that Sphere 3D was down 50% from its recent top, the reality is Sphere 3D is still 200% from its bottom established at the beginning of December last year. I do expect to continue to see this, continue to see these increases, these multiples in gains from the bottom, but there will be dips and rips along the way. For me, this is the time to be excited for the Bitcoin miners. While everyone else is worried about them, while everyone else is like, I'm not going to touch these, I'm avoiding these now. The halving is going to cut the rewards. Well, once the market prices this in, I do think these miners will start popping off again. But am I right? Am I wrong? What say you? Are you taking advantage of this red day for the Bitcoin miners? Are you taking profits on Bitcoin and rolling it into the miners? Or are you avoiding the miners entirely, potentially looking for better prices? Let me know what you guys are doing in the comments below. And how do you feel about the recent news for CleanSpark finally reaching that 16 exahash target? It's nice that we finally made it to 16 exahash, and there's even more to come. Thanks as always for watching, guys. Let me know when you think Bitcoin will see all-time highs. Do you think it'll be this week? Do you think it'll be before the halving or after? We're getting so dang close to it. Thanks again for all your support, guys. I will see you on the next video.